and welcome to Women Who Lead, a podcast where I interview interesting and remarkable women from around the world on what it takes to be successful in career and life. My name is Jess Carr, a mother, leader in the corporate world, and the breadwinner in my family. Join me as I discover firsthand how to live a fulfilling, balanced life and be happy, healthy, and successful. Welcome to the episode. My guest today is Rhian Windridge. Rhian is a senior leader in corporate real estate and a passionate advocate for women in the industry. As a UK native, Rhian has worked in Asia Pacific and now resides back in London with her family, including her two boys, 5 and 3. Join us as we discuss how success comes from prioritising your outcome, how to create and leverage your network, and the importance of having a big purpose and mission. Hi Rhian, welcome to the show.
Hi Jess.
So let's just kick off the show by you giving us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, what your current role is, and a little bit about your career arc of how you've ended up where it is that you are now.
Sure. So I work in corporate real estate. I'm a project manager of sorts. I'm in a leadership role now, but my journey has really been through that built environment space, delivering projects, starting with major projects in the UK real estate sector for like the London Olympics, working on big regeneration city centre type projects, and then moving more into corporate commercial office when I moved to Australia in 2010. And then as I moved into Asia Pacific and had a role in Singapore, taking on a lot more account, we call them, type roles, where we're leading on a whole vast array of real estate type advisory work. So from strategy into deals and transactional activity, and then into project delivery, and getting involved in a lot more of the sort of best practice design work as well for corporate tenants. So I've worked with a lot of major companies over the years, and I've really enjoyed working in the real estate sector, but fell into it completely by accident after university. Just one of those things that you get into and you're sort of interested in, and then you realize all the topics that you were passionate about as a teenager are actually very much manifest in that industry. So for me, sustainability was something I've always been really interested in the environment and protecting that, and also just making great places. So I've always been from a sort of distanced way interested in architecture and design, not a designer myself, but just having that opportunity to be deeply involved in creating great places for posterity has always been something that's interested me, and doing it in a way that is really inclusive of artists and sort of community groups and creativity. That kind of thing has been important to me, particularly in the last decade. And it's a great space to work in, actually, because it's very diverse. There's lots of different types of people that work in the property sector, but it's also been kind of a challenge in some respects, because there's also a lot of stereotypes in construction and a lot of challenges that you can come across working as a woman in that kind of field. So it's been an interesting sort of nearly 2 decades now for me of working in different countries and with different types of people, and certainly for different companies, but all within that built environment space.
Yeah. So when you left high school and you went into university, what did you study when you went into university?
I did a history degree. So I came into property from a very, probably a different angle to a lot of other people. So I did a history degree, and when I left, I remember talking to so many people about, what I could do and what fields I could work in. And I thought about marketing, and I thought about going in and doing some civil service type work in the UK. I thought about law, and probably would have been quite a good lawyer, actually. My parents always said I was quite argumentative. I thought about going into more creative industries like advertising, that kind of thing. But when I was doing my gap year, which I took in Africa in 2003-4, I started to work when I was in Cape Town. I started to do a bit of journalism type activity for a couple of the broadsheets there, and they had a lot of coverage of some of the Cape Flats and Kailitsa, so some of the more informal settlements, and that got me interested in urban development and how do we actually create sustainable urban development, socially sustainable. And the developing world was always something that was really important to me as well, and trying to make sure that I worked in that sector and did something that had positive impact was one of my career motivations. So when I went back to the UK after that gap year, I started to think about studying again. And I did a master's at London School of Economics in population and development studies. Again, you wouldn't think naturally related to the built environment, but it was actually a really good introduction to that sector from the social science perspective. So we had a module, I remember, on city growth and on how do you actually plan for sustainable city growth in developing world countries, but also in Western countries. And that was all about sort of sanitation and the link to medical needs and social mobility and all of these kind of interesting concepts that actually are really important to all the work that we do in cities. And there happened to be a lecturer who encouraged me to apply to a government role that was being advertised at that time that was in English Partnerships, which was a government NGO, if you not NGO, a government Quango type setup in the UK, and they delivered housing. So they did all the government's housing and all the big regeneration projects. So I joined them as a graduate, and they were working in property. So they were huge landholders in the UK. And that was a really interesting strategic role and a policy role and a delivery role. And you get to try out all these different types of jobs within that sector for a couple of years and ultimately decide what you want to do. And for me, I quite quickly realised that I wasn't suited to policy making. I didn't want to sit in Westminster and write about housing policy. I wanted to deliver housing and deliver communities. So I took the decision after a couple of years of working for the government to then go and work for a consultant practice in London. But they were working sort of consulting back into the public sector, but working on big projects in South London and thinking about how do we bring disused sites back to use? How do we start to actually utilise some of our spare spaces in our cities and make them viable again and sort of prime the private sector to bring investment back and to make communities vibrant again. And I absolutely loved working in that role because it was really interesting from a financial perspective. It was all about embedding sustainability principles. It was a really interesting role to try to improve communities, which was, again, something I was really passionate about. And then the financial crisis hit and everything kind of ground to a halt.
So this is around 2008, 2009 then, yeah.
And, you know, I was in my late-ish 20s and I just thought, time for a change. So then I moved to Australia. So I'd met by that time my now husband, and we decided we would pack our bags, take a couple of suitcases with us and try our luck in Australia. And that was meant to be for about a year. And I think I told my mum, oh, don't worry, I'll be back within a year or two. And 10 years later, I returned. But it was great. We bought a banged up old car and we drove around Queensland and Northern Territory and then ran out of money and then moved to Sydney and got jobs working for big corporates. But I pivoted at that point into commercial office. And I didn't really know anything about fit out, but it turns out it isn't that hard. So I learned pretty quickly. I worked with some big complex projects. I worked with some really great PMs that taught me a lot in Sydney. But it's very much a macho world over there, so it was kind of a different culture.
So just give us a bit of an idea about where you are in terms of your career and what you had built up to date before you and your soon-to-be husband had decided to go to Australia, because he's Australian.
He's Aussie, yeah, he's Australian. So I was probably a senior project manager at that point when I left the UK. I had a lot of experience doing pre-construction, so where we would look at feasibility studies or financial analysis of sites or where to invest, that kind of thing. I'd done a lot of sort of overarching design management as well, pre-construction, so master planning, working with architects to look at redesigning city centres, sort of pulling together large programs of work. That was something that I'd spent quite a bit of time doing. And I think by that point I'd also started doing my RICS chartership. In fact, I had. So I'd done another master's for a couple of years before we went to Australia, and that was in built environment specific work. So that was at Oxford Brookes, and it was a sort of project management type master's that I did whilst I was working. And that was great to have that because it actually gave me a solid foundation in the principles of all the things that you need to work on all the time in the built environment, whether it's procurement and contracts and legal, or like how to manage risk or financial reporting or the phases of a building project, etc.
So I guess
yeah,
I was just going to ask, at that stage, when you decided to do extra study, was that because you wanted to know more about the particular topics, or because you thought that that might help you in your day-to-day job or might help you advance?
both. So I knew that, because I knew that by that point I wanted to stay in the property sector and I needed to get an RICS qualification. So particularly in the UK, the RICS is very, very strong as a standards body and as an institution that supports built environment professionals. And a lot of employers will ask that you have got an RICS chartership. So it was sort of the thing that everyone did, but also it's just very useful. When you work as a project manager and you're delivering major projects, you really do need to know what you're doing. So you need to know about all of the legal and the compliance work that you're involved with. You need to have a strong grip on procurement methodologies and actually how you're going to contract these highly, highly complex programs of work, and lots and lots of different trade contractors. So I knew I needed to understand more in order to be a really good practitioner. And I was interested in it. And the other thing I knew was that I wanted to do it before I was too far along in my career. I wanted to do it when I was in a more junior role, when I had time. So I used to leave the office at sort of 5:30 or something, and I would go home and spend a few hours studying in the evening, in the days before children or before a stressful job where I was working in the evening. So I knew I'd get to the point probably in my 30s where I had less time. So I wanted to get it all done in my 20s, get my master's out of the way, get the chartership, which is 2 years of structured training, out of the way, which I did. And it was definitely the right thing to do, because that helped me land a job in a new market where I had no contact. So, you getting a job in Sydney, you do obviously need to have people that you know there, ideally, and I didn't really have anyone. I had a few contacts from London that I did leverage, but it was sort of harder to prove that I would add value if I didn't have relevant qualifications. So that got me an in, I think, to sort of say I understand all these ways that the work is done. So that was helpful.
So here you are. You've landed in Sydney now. This is what, 2009, end of 2009, was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've landed this job. So what's tell us a little bit about this portion of your journey, and before you've then, I think from there you went to Singapore. Is that right?
So I was in Sydney for about nearly 4 years, or for about 3.5 years. It was a really fun period of my life. Like, we were traveling loads, we were meeting some great people. The job was really exciting. The job was full on. I remember I used to work for multiple clients, obviously in parallel, and run many projects at the same time. It was very, very busy. I remember working quite long hours and being quite stretched, but also learning a hell of a lot. And I was lucky enough that I worked with some amazing designers in Sydney at the time, from Woods Bagot, from WSP, that taught me an awful lot about commercial real estate, commercial office. And I had the opportunity to work on some really good schemes there, some groundbreaking schemes around design. And it was an exciting time. I did find it, in a way, challenging to adjust. Like, culturally, it is quite different. And I think particularly then, this is 10 years ago, Australia was a different place around the sort of internal culture of the office and how people relate to each other. And it was definitely different to the UK. It was much more sort of brash and in your face, and you had a lot more macho swearing going on in the office. And I was like this quite naive girl from London. Didn't like to think I was, but I probably was. And I remember people sort of saying to me, "Oh, you stick out like a sore thumb here," and it was probably true. But I quickly learned, and I had some good friends that I made in the industry, and they sort of supported me on that learning journey that I took there when I was delivering big projects. But I had the skills to do it, but it was a very different industry. So it was all like, commercial office is different to doing big strategic government projects. So I had to make that transition quite quickly and learn a lot of new skills very quickly around how to execute that. But I had a lot of really solid relationships that I built up in that period that then really helped me when I went to Singapore after Australia, because I still worked in that Asia Pacific world, and it was very useful to have the Australian network in play, because from your role as well in Singapore, that link between Singapore and Australia is very strong. So having those relationships was great, was really useful for me, and just very important to also sustain me in a period that was a lot of work. We were really busy, from not just in the Australia side of period of my life, but also up in Singapore. It was full on. I was kind of in my element in a way. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I'm not very good at balance, put it that way. So I was throwing myself into it 110%, and trying to get a lot done and a lot achieved in a short period of time. So it was quite intense.
And did that take a toll on your personal life, or even your mental health during those times of throwing yourself in holus bolus?
No, because I love it. It's kind of how I'm wired. I mean, I think my long-suffering husband, no, not really. He's fine. We've got a very balanced relationship. So he knew, he's always known that I am very passionate about what I do, and that I really want to make change in the built environment. I want it to be better. I get very frustrated that it's taking so long to make certain improvements and adjustments to how we all do business, whether that's the complexity of delivering a truly sustainable space or sustainable campus building, or development, or the sort of challenges of just changing the culture of our industry for the better, and making sure that more people can have points of entry and can grow in the industry, and we are more diverse in how we hire and have different skill sets, and encourage more creative problem solving. Like I'm very passionate about all those things, and I've always been involved in different organizations to kind of push that agenda forward, both within the companies I've worked for, but also externally. And Matt, my husband, is well aware of that, and I think he knows that gives me energy. I am a classic extrovert. I get energy from other people, and I think that me throwing myself into something 100% is just my MO. Like that's what I do. And at the moment in my life where I am now, which is 10 years later on from Sydney that I just described, and 2 children, and back in the UK, it's only at this point that I'm now thinking, do I need to slow down and try to do less, and do less to try to do more, because I need to have some more balance in some parts of my life. But I know that I will always be energized by the work that I do and by the people that I work with. So to try to actually step back from that, to try to be better, would not make me better. It would make me worse. It would make me less happy and less. I think I would be less fulfilled.
So I guess in taking that, thinking about all of the throwing yourself into the work and everything that you've been doing up until now. And now you're talking about, what does it look like now? Can I, start to slow down to speed up? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and your thought process of what worked, I think, in the other way you've described, and what hasn't worked, and what you're thinking needs to change now? Like, just to give us a bit of understanding of what's going on in your head there.
Yeah, so when I moved to Singapore and had a couple of years of traveling like a crazy person around the region, and being away from Singapore home, if you like, for at least sort of 2 weeks probably of every month, or a week to 2 on average of every month. I really enjoyed it at that time. And then the big thing that changed for us as a family was that we had a child. So I had my first boy in 2015, and that was such a big learning experience for me. And actually, I do say to some people in my teams now, like, that I learned such a lot from having him, because I had to leave the office and go home once I'd gone back to work after 4 months of having him. When I was working, I was actually fine going back after 4 months. I had an amazing home help. We were really lucky in that respect, in that we were in Singapore, and able to facilitate me going back to work. But at the same time, I had to leave the office at a reasonable time to get back to feed the baby in the evening. And that break of knowing I have got to leave at 5. I'm not staying until 7 or 8 o'clock or later, I got to leave. And the fact that my inbox was still had unread emails and there were things on my action list that I hadn't done, it didn't matter because I had a little person I had to be back at home for. And what I realized over the first maybe 6 months of being back in the office was that actually nothing had completely fallen over. I still had a job. It was okay. I didn't have to do absolutely everything that day. So I became a lot better after I had children, I think, at prioritizing and at letting things go and at realizing that that not taking an action is actually an action. And you have to be quite forceful with yourself sometimes to not do something because somebody else will do it. And effective delegation is that you need to be able to empower people to be able to take responsibility. And I think before I had kids, I was kind of this mindset that I just, no one else was doing it fast enough and I just had to get it done. And that hasn't completely gone, but it definitely has lessened a dramatic amount because I suppose the penny just dropped that I was one single person. And ever since I've had children, I've realized the value of having a plan to scale. And I think about it all the time. How do I scale this? I can't scale this as just me. I have to be able to find a team and build a vision around what we want to do and inspire them and empower them to also lead. And that has been something that is difficult to do, but you have to do it in order to actually achieve your goals because, like I say, you're just one person at the end of the day, and if you're trying to run over everything and do everything, it's not going to work. So that was a massive learning for me.
Yeah, so and you end up being a bottleneck in trying to get projects completed and trying to get what you want done. So did you find that was that a learned behavior from your earlier part of your career of having to be and I'm not wanting to put words in your mouth, so please correct me, but this idea of maybe having to prove yourself in a male-dominated industry as you were up and coming, or is it more just an inbuilt kind of personality trait of needing to do it yourself?
I am definitely a bit of a perfectionist, and I think I've become less of a perfectionist as the years have gone by, and I've had more and more work to do, and I think you have to get things done. And I remember that was a very big learning for me. The whole what's the lady Sheryl Sandberg, the done is better than perfect thing. I think that's true. I don't think it's always true. I think sometimes you really do need to get things perfect, certain things. But you need to know what those things are. And certainly I did have to prove myself. And I think I've always had a feeling of, yes, I need to solidly be able to prove my worth. And whether that's because that's who I am or because it's a male dominated industry, I don't know. It's probably a little bit of both. I do think in my observations, particularly in Sydney, are that men are promoted on the potential of their work that they will do in the future, and women are told to prove themselves before they are promoted. I've observed that on multiple occasions, not just for me, but for others as well. So there is an element of that you feel like you have to just do that little bit more. But I also know that it was that sort of perfectionism in me was just a process of learning and growing and changing as a leader. Like I realize that now looking back, that you have to be able to let go of certain things that you had as a habit of doing in order to open up time and space for new things. And that for me in the last 7 years or so, or slightly less, has been a big learning curve, that kind of taking on more and more and more and more. And the company that I work for in Singapore, we were scaling beyond any recognition. It was unprecedented how much growth we had. So we were trying to do all these incredibly innovative things within our real estate portfolio whilst doubling, trebling, it was going through the roof. So we were running 100 miles an hour. And I think that you can't achieve those things unless you can step back and say, in order to do this, I have to be able to hire some really good people, make some great hires, empower them, give them a vision, set them off and free the way up for them to do great work. If I can't do that, we can't achieve what we want to achieve, because I can't do everything and I would fail anyway. There's just too much. So for me, that's still such an important thing, that how do we scale, but scale with value is still such a big question. I think that organizations have everywhere. Maybe not so much after COVID. I think probably people are less worried about scaling and more concerned about some other things. But it's still I think a valid point, because it's about what kind of leader you want to be, and if you want to take people with you and be someone that empowers others to do their best work and help them remove the blockers, or if you want to dictate the solution. And I realized that I was getting into territory of dictating a solution, and I needed to step away and be more empowering to other people.
And through that process, did you have mentors that helped you, I guess, even identify that this was going on, or was it something that you figured out on your own?
I did. I've sort of had a series of informal mentors, or I wouldn't necessarily call them mentors per se. They're more people that they're who you would phone within your career for advice. And sometimes they're peers and sometimes they're mentors. And I think that to be successful, you need those informal networks as well, to be able to reach out and ask specific questions or ask for help. That was another thing. Like even the last couple of years, just being able to recognize that it's actually okay to ask for someone's help. Like I help people all the time. I'm always going out of my way to introduce people to other people in my network, or look at their CVs, or pass their CV to someone I know to try to get them in somewhere or give them advice. I'm happy to do that, because I think that we need to have a global network and a sort of ecosystem of people that are all helping each other to succeed. But I realized I didn't necessarily ask for help myself very often at all. And just being specific about what you would like that person to do for you and how they can help you is actually really important, because otherwise they don't know. And they're just kind of guessing, like, what does she want me to do now? So I had, within our organizations, we would have sort of mentor and buddy type systems, which were quite helpful. Particularly the last couple of years I was in Singapore, I did have a quite senior female lead that was my mentor within the organization there, and she was great. I probably didn't leverage her as much as I should have, actually. But then, I think that informal network of people that are in your industry but not in your company is actually also quite helpful. But I'm not suggesting that I have all the answers at all, because I don't do enough of that stuff now. I need to do more. I think we need to all actively work on our sponsor network within our organizations, people that advocate for you when you're not in the room, people that bring your name up and say, Rhian's good at XYZ, maybe we should give her that opportunity to grow her skill set further. I don't think we nearly as much time as we should on that kind of thing.
And how, like, have you got any tips for, I guess, how you've learnt to build that network, or how people have reached out to you? So, like, what would be some advice around how to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think being really genuine about what you want to achieve, and like being curious and having an interest in something and being passionate about it. For me, I'm drawn to people who want to make change happen and want to see. I don't really want to have a conversation with someone who just says something like, "I want to be a manager," or "I want to succeed." Like, why? What are you trying to do here? You need to have an idea of what the point is. And I think if you are able to reach out to anybody in a senior role and say, I'm super interested in XYZ about your company, or I've seen this article and I'm really interested around like getting your thoughts on it, or I really want help in this area because I'm super passionate about achieving whatever. If you can provide that context and be genuinely interested in trying to have a dialogue, then that's going to be much more successful. And I think that's pretty much what I've done and continue to do, where it's actually about seeking out people that have similar interests, or even if they don't have similar interests, just asking, being to be open to listening to what people have to say and what their challenges are. And I've done a bit of that recently at a global level, just to build relationships, like putting time into that and saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Do you think there's value in this? Or can you just give me some feedback on this idea that I've got? Because it might be completely stupid and other people might have already done it. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Can you help me just to get a bit of context? And I often do that, send people a note. I'd really like to pick your brains just for 30 minutes about where you see the organization going, or what the trends are, or where you see opportunities coming up. Like, can I just get some of your time just to sort of talk it through. I think people are more open to that than you'd expect.
Yeah, so it's that sometimes it because we're all taught as children not to speak to strangers, and that on both sides of the fence people can be a little bit scared to kind of reach out because of that whole, they're a stranger, are they going to think this is weird, are they going to blow me off? But I think as you said, interested people are interesting. So if you've got something that you're particularly passionate about, it's much easier to reach out to people, to talk to them about that particular topic and what you're trying to achieve.
I would say, though, that in my experience, it's much better to have the introduction of someone you know. So it's much better to be able to say, so-and-so said I should reach out, or I know so-and-so from my days doing X, Y, Z. I understand you know each other. It'd be really great just to check in. That's much easier to then have you're much more likely to get a response. But the other thing is that I think we trade, like not just in the real estate sector, in any sector, on the work we have done. So, you have to do great work and earn the respect and earn the trust. And then people will say, yes, you've got something to offer. And then once you have done great work and you've put in the effort and you have achieved something, you have to understand how powerful that is. I think that's something all of us underestimate, our own power and our own influence and our own ability to be able to have an impact on other people's lives and have value for them. And that's something that maybe objectively women probably do less than men, or don't recognize that power as much as maybe men inherently do. This sort of the informal network that trades on someone's respect for someone else, but the network of respect, it's like it's the sort of old boys club, really, isn't it? You've got guys all talking to each other about the value of some other guy that the first person doesn't know, and then that person gets an introduction just on the value chain that the other people are talking about. We need that as women to be more functional. We need to be able to sort of talk in a respectful way about people within our own network and our extended network, to open doors for that extended network. And I think that has started to happen more, but I would like to see more of it happening in the future.
So do you think, like, it's the end of November in 2020 and we've just in the middle of COVID, and so you're in the UK and you're still in lockdown number 2, is that right? Or number 3? What lockdown are we in now?
I can't remember. Lockdown, I think it's lockdown 2, but we're in it's sort of it's not quite so bad. Schools are still open, thank goodness. So it's more about restricting who you see, obviously, and then some shops and pubs and things like that are not open, which is rather depressing.
But what about workplaces?
So workplaces are not open. If you can work from home, you should. I haven't worked from home. I haven't worked in the office since March, and it's not likely we'll be going back in the next 6 months in any meaningful capacity. We'll probably sort of cycle into the office in rotations. I think many large corporates are in the same position. And obviously we're in this incredibly interesting and I think actually quite inspiring period of completely pivoting our real estate portfolios. And there's so many opportunities that come out of that I'm very excited to see. I think we've seen changes happen in the last year or the last 9 months that we would have waited 5 to 10 years for. And I'm particularly interested in the technology side of things at the moment and how we use data to inform decisions and actions and to really push forward this sustainability revolution in real estate. And I think we're going to see a huge change in that area in the next couple of years, because we will have to. Every company in the world will need to know, how are my spaces performing? How occupied are they? How productive are they as spaces for my teams that are hybrid? Work from home, work from the office. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and then
I don't want to be too buoyant about it. COVID is going to have a massive detrimental impact on lots of things, but I think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic about the change as well.
Well, and particularly when we're talking about, workplaces, people work in workplaces. We're not at this stage talking about robotics in factories, not yet anyway. So when we're talking about the people and the lived experience of, I guess, what people are going through in COVID, can you tell us just a little bit about what's it been like for you? Because you've got two young children, so you've got two boys, what they'd be 5 and 3?
One of them, so yeah, 5 yesterday. He's very excited, and 3 Christmas Eve. So yeah, quite small still, preschool and just at school. So yeah, it's been a interesting year. I mean, I would say on the positive side, I feel very lucky that actually we've been able to spend so much time with them. But young children. Before my eldest went to school, we were obviously in lockdown number 1, which was no nurseries and schools open. That was hard from a working perspective. That was a challenge. We were very lucky that the weather in the UK was amazing over spring and for much of the summer. And we have a nice garden, so our strategy was chuck the kids outside and go on a video call and walk around the garden and kind of monitor that they're not falling out of a tree or impaling themselves on something. But actually the nice thing about lockdown has been the family time. And I think so many people have said this. I've spoken to so many people across our company at the moment that are really valuing taking back some of those simple things in life that we've given up. And we've given them up so cheaply, actually, having dinner together with family. That was, for us as a family pre-lockdown, we never did that. We were on the train to London every single day, maybe once a week. One of us would work from home and we'd manage to have supper with the kids, but otherwise it was the train, the commute, rushing to drop them off in the morning, rushing to pick them up in the evening, get home, get fed, get to bed. And it was this sort of that hamster wheel of life that sometimes you think, oh my goodness, why am I doing this? I love my job, but this is actually quite hard. And certainly it was a lot harder than Singapore, having home health and the support that provides. But lockdown for us has been fantastic. We've had 5 days a week having supper with the children and being able to now pick Luke up from school when he finishes in the afternoon and then just get home and carry on working, and he sort of potters around and does his own thing. It is much more flexible. It's much more relaxed. On the downside, all the relaxed time that I gained back because I don't have to commute is now just video conferencing. I mean, it started off well in that I had more time to maybe go for a walk or do something with the children in the morning. But now those mornings are just 8 o'clock calls. You're straight in. And I think that's something we need to think about quite carefully around how we manage our time if this continues, and how in a sort of hybrid environment of working a bit at home, a bit at the office, and how we manage that, I think will be quite important to be quite thoughtful about it, really, about what we want to do when we are working from home. But it's not all been bad. I almost feel guilty about having had quite a good lockdown, if that makes sense. You see so much hardship happening and what other people are suffering, and you think, well, although the real estate industry could catastrophically implode and we may all be worrying about our jobs in some regard in the next couple of years, for the moment it's not been too bad because it's given us more flexibility. But in the long term, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic about the change, whilst at the same time on my radar is, if you can work from anywhere, companies are going to be getting people to work from anywhere. And that doesn't mean working in the UK. It could mean working in a much cheaper economy, and shifting those jobs elsewhere. So I think we have some very big questions that will come up in the next couple of years that will drive a certain type of solution for some companies that could make our real estate sector, it could change it fundamentally forever.
So then, I guess then personally for you and the things that you've learnt as you've gone through COVID. So, from what I've been hearing from this whole discussion is things around prioritizing, building your network and making sure that you've got this kind of informal network that's going to help promote you and where you're going. And then you were talking about through COVID, this kind of realization about, what's it all for if, what's all the commuting and the rushing around and the stressing and through COVID, you got a bit of time back, and now it's starting to bleed back into, well, it's going on so long now. And then the work day is bleeding either side of, I guess, of where it used to be. What are you finding in terms of, what you need to do to try and keep a hold of that? Is it about making your priorities? Are you putting any restrictions? I suppose restrictions might not be the right word, but restrictions in place around how you're managing your calendar or how you're managing the way that you go to work?
Yeah, so I am, as I said earlier, a little bit rubbish at all this kind of thing about balance. I've always been, I need to prioritize probably my health in terms of my fitness and that kind of thing more than I do. So that's going to be, for me, next year, a New Year's resolution. Like, I need to do more exercise. I need to spend a bit more time focusing on that kind of thing rather than just work and then kids. I do think that there are mechanisms you can take. So I've actually quite successfully recently started just blocking Friday completely and saying no meetings. So that's the day where I can actually get stuff done, which means I don't go into the weekend thinking I need to work at the weekend to get things done. I've just sat on video calls all week and I've now got some critical things I have to get off my desk. So that's actually been a really helpful thing. And now everyone knows I just don't do meetings on Fridays. So they don't tend to book them. And it's also very helpful because it gives you space to have those emergency calls you might need to have for half an hour through the day. And it just means that you can focus. So my job at the moment is very meeting heavy. I think any sort of exec level role where you have to be leading big teams, you just spend the whole time on the phone or in our case on video calls. So clearing that day is really critical. I'm trying to not do early mornings. I think trying to keep that 8 till 9 open so you can, if you need to, do the school run or go for a walk or whatever. It's not working that well for me. I think the problem is when you have teams in different parts of the world, those early mornings and late evenings are important because that's their time when they're awake. So I think we have to just be flexible. I've enjoyed the flexibility this year. I think that's been beneficial for everybody. But the problem comes when the flexibility of she's available early morning and late evening also then becomes all day as well, and you can't kind of step out of your day at any time, and that is a challenge. So yeah, the Friday thing for me has probably been the most effective mechanism, but I need to carve out a bit more time probably just for myself.
So did you, when you decided that you were going to carve out Fridays, was that, did you experience any pushback, or because of your level of seniority, do you think it was easier, or do you just think it was a personal choice that made it easy? You went, no, that's my line.
So it's definitely easier because I'm in a client-side role. If I was in a consulting role, it would be much harder. But the fact that it's on client side, I'm able to say to my consultant team and to the wider team, I'm trying to avoid doing meetings on this day. And actually, the culture of the organization at the moment has changed to say to people, actually, it's fine if your team want to do a meeting-free week. We can test that. So there's actually a lot more acceptance, I think, of corporates actually giving freedom to their team, the team structure, but also the individuals to say, I will be most productive if I can do X, Y, Z. And by taking meeting-free weeks is probably a little bit much. I'm not sure that would work in a project that's moving at fast pace, but definitely a meeting-free day isn't going to harm anybody and actually can sometimes be very, very beneficial to a broader team to be able to say you can actually have a day to focus on things without having that interruption. So we're encouraging within our teams, like having sprint time at the beginning of the day. So coming together for 30 minutes and just identifying what do we need to do today? Who's collaborating? Who's focusing? What's the real hot topics we need to close out on? And then, like I say, the maybe a day a week where you don't do meetings is quite helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm still in Asia Pacific. I'm in Singapore and working in a global team. And I was on maternity leave earlier this year. And when I came back from maternity leave, it was, sort of towards, well and truly into COVID. And all of a sudden I've realized that there's this culture now of global meetings. So it's not even just more connection, etc., but it's these global meetings. So I'm now on calls at least 2 nights a week, whereas pre-COVID I was only, and pre-maternity leave I was only on it might be 1 a week, and even that one I could possibly attend every second week if I needed to. It really depended on what was happening. And I'll even say that in the last 2 weeks, I've been on calls every single night until 10:30 at night. Now, that's part of being in Asia Pacific and trying to, that's the only time zone that you can get everybody in the world together. But definitely, I've pushed back to my global counterparts and sort of said, hey, I'm doing my best to keep it to 2 nights a week. So unless we've got an urgent bid on, or we have some reason to do that, then please respect that. And on the most part, people are very respectful of that. They do understand that their Asia Pacific co-workers don't, can't do any other time but the middle of the night for these calls. There is also a little bit of an education piece. So I spend a bit of time, educating my global counterparts on the fact that Asia Pacific doesn't just then adjust our whole working time. We actually still have to do things at 8 and 9 in the morning.
Yeah, I would say I've noticed a few trends that are good, and I've noticed a few trends that are worrying. So definitely the plethora of meetings where you might have 30 minutes where you grab a coffee with someone, or you can have a discussion over lunch, that's now become a 30-minute video call or a kind of hour, even worse. I've also noticed that people are not so good at providing agendas before meetings during COVID. And I find that personally incredibly annoying. Like, I've got so many meetings, I need to be able to go into the calendar and see, right, that's what that meeting's about, that's the outcome. There's a lot more of this sort of random chats happening, which I don't think are value add at all. So I think we all need to be better at saying, actually, if there's no agenda, I'm not coming. Yeah. Sorry, got to be on this. But you need to we all need to be more respectful of each other's time, especially when everybody is working remotely. And having a clear outcome is really important. Taking an hour for a meeting is rarely required. Learning, one of the most important skills we can all have is how to run a good meeting. The number of project teams I've run over the years where it's just depressing how no one can actually chair a meeting. And the problem is you end up taking over the meeting. And this is to my earlier point around making sure you can step away. There's an element of we have to be able to coach effectively to be able to then step away, because if you just step away before people are ready, it can be a complete disaster, and that they're not maybe skilled enough to manage, in our case, large rooms of people, large complex teams, where you have to be able to cut through the noise. We work in an industry where it's very easy, because everyone's subject matter experts, to bamboozle other people and for consultants to make it sound like they've done something when they've clearly done absolutely nothing. So, we need to be able to kind of manage a meeting more effectively, to do it faster and get what you want out of it. That's a skill. I don't think we teach that enough. I honestly don't. Like, the skill of being able to chair and run effective meetings is highly sought after, and frankly not that widespread at the moment. But I do that they've got like the whole don't invite me if you don't have an agenda and an outcome. Try to keep it to 30 minutes. And I honestly think, Jess, there's too many global meetings that are not useful. Like these massive meetings that people have that don't necessarily, that are kind of ambled through, where especially if you're in Asia Pacific and it's 11 p.m, you're thinking, go to the point. People in America are kind of having their morning coffee. I think we have to be more respectful of people's time. We have to be more efficient with what we want to get out of a meeting, and more clear with what we want to get out of a meeting. And then we just need to kind of get to it, but in a way that also builds a relationship. So it's a very fine balance. You need to have a little bit of that chat at the beginning of a meeting, but at the same time, you don't want that to go on for 20 minutes. And so people in other parts of the world are frustrated.
I have to say, I remember once, and this was quite a while ago, I was invited as a guest to a client's global call, and there was people from North America, Asia Pacific and Europe, and so therefore it was quite late for Asia Pacific. I think it started at 11 p.m. They spent the first 25 minutes of the call just asking each other how their Thanksgiving was, and I was like sitting there just really hoping that my Asia Pacific client would just pipe up and be like, hi, we've got a guest on the call, can we move it along? But she didn't. And I was like, oh, damn it.
So probably because of this wanting to build strong relationships. So like I said, there's a balance, but my observation is at the moment there's too many global calls. There's too many calls with lots and lots of people on them. Like you and I work in big global corporates. That is absolutely a hazard of any massive company, that you start that it's this kind of culture of adding people. So whether it's adding people to emails or adding people to invites, and I think we're just at this inflection point. Not just as an industry, like every company is having this challenge of, we've got all this technology, we can connect all the time, but we're not really getting any more done. Like, is it actually moving faster than when people used to write faxes, or even before faxes, letters to each other? I don't know whether it is. And I think we've got to take a step back and look at, how do we want to lead? Because the other thing that I've really observed is everybody has an opinion, but nobody makes a decision. And as a leader, we have to make a decision. And I remember someone saying to me early in my career in project management, the point of a project manager is to provide direction. If you're not providing direction, you're basically a letterbox where someone's giving you something and you're giving it to someone else. You have to stand in the middle and direct. And that has stuck with me like my whole career, around provide direction and give people clarity. And what I see in COVID is a lot of uncertainty, and as a result, a lot of work, but maybe not as much clarity as perhaps we need. And that's not everywhere, but the whole world is sort of standing back thinking, okay, what happens now? And lots of opinion, but not a lot of clarity. So I think to be strong leaders, whether you're male or female, you need to have that direction. But I would observe that women with clarity of direction are maybe received in a slightly more hostile manner at times than men with clarity of direction. And that is something that needs to change. I think it is changing. But it's just an observation of the last decade that crops up in ways that you maybe wouldn't expect.
So, well, I was going to ask a little bit earlier about, do you think that during this time it's a good opportunity for women who want to become more visible? Because, way back earlier in the conversation, we were talking about how women are potentially judged on what they have done versus guys being judged on what they can do. And, now coming to this point where, we want to leverage those informal networks. And, is it something that right now, if we can start to try and provide agendas for meetings and actually almost informally take the hold of, if no one's taking the hold of the meeting, that if we could take the hold of the meeting and provide that structure and direction for it, do you think that would work in our favor? Or do you think that could end up being seen as the woman taking the meeting minutes?
I know what you mean. Nobody ever wants to do the minutes. I do think that we should. I think we should step up and it's not just a COVID piece. Like I think no one's going to ask us to come to the table. We need to do it ourselves. Like the other thing I always keep coming back to is, don't ask, don't get. That is so true, particularly in our sector. Like, unless you're there and you're saying to people, I would really like to have the opportunity to do this, they're not going to just sort of off their own back think, oh, I'll just go and give this to you. So I think we do have the challenge of the informal network that tends to be an informal male network working more effectively, like I mentioned earlier on. But there is an unconscious bias piece that we are obviously challenged with, where people will hire people like themselves. And I'm not just talking about gender. Like, I think that it's an issue across the board, and it is being addressed, and rightly so. It probably could be addressed more proactively, but it is being addressed. I do think, though, that we have to play our part, and I've never been someone that sits back and sort of bemoans the fact that there's a gender gap. I mean, it is extremely frustrating, but we have to keep pushing. Like, if you think about how far things have come and how far we have progressed, I'm heartened by that in many ways. Like, I still get deeply irritated that it's not completely equal, but it's people are more and more aware of it. And I think that there is more of a corporate response to it that needs to be more meaningful in some ways, but at least there's active an active attempt to redress the balance by some companies, not all, but certainly by some. How to make that actually meaningful as opposed to spin is a very important distinction that we need to make. I think the amount of stuff on LinkedIn that you see around, women leadership courses or, investment by big corporates in challenging the gender gap. Yeah, right. Give us the data, tell us the data, and then start to make a really concerted effort to improve on those statistics. Don't tell us that you've run a little course for all your women in Hong Kong or whatever. That sort of thing actually, I think, is patronizing. I think we need to get out there with the information and be, as big corporations, be very data driven and be very clear with what our objectives are and what we're going to do about it. But equally, as I said at the beginning, I think there is positive change happening, but we need to take responsibility ourselves, and to have a plan, and to be mindful that everything is a choice. And I want to have a career, but I also want to have a solid family life, and I want to have children, and I want to spend time with them and all that kind of thing. So it's about the choices that you make and the things that you value spending your time on. And I think for some women, and for some men, they don't want to have the corporate world life. They want to be entrepreneurial or have their own business or have more flexibility, or so I think in whatever course you take, you need to own your own decisions. And I suppose one of the worrying trends I see at the moment, and it's not just what we were saying earlier on around like where's the leadership or where's the clarity, is actually where's the responsibility? Giving someone else responsibility for your career because you blame it on a system. I've never subscribed to that. And I think that we can take responsibility for ourselves and push the agenda forward and support other women to take responsibility for their careers and themselves, and to try to narrow the gap and make the choices easier and make them fairer. But the responsibility has to be ours.
Yeah. And so I guess for your career and where you're at, what do you think's made you most successful in that? Because we've talked about your career arc that you've been through. What do you think's contributed to you getting to where you are now, and your level of success that you're experiencing?
Energy and drive, I would say. Just having energy to do stuff, and hopefully to do it well. I do think that it's your motor. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have to be the person that's got the motivation. And I think that my energy has always stood me in good stead. Like, as I said earlier, that's from being passionate about an outcome. And for me, whether it's an individual project that I'm working on or whether it's a team that I have that I'm building, protecting the outcome has always been such an important thing for me. Like, I used to say to my team in Singapore, like, always ask two things: ask what if, and ask so what. We have clarity on those two things. Why are we doing this? And what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we did it better? How could it be better? And then so what is why? Why does this matter? Sometimes we kind of get so clouded by doing something that we forget the so what factor. And the so what factor is really important. We maybe don't think about that as much as we should. What's the point? So, you've got to have that clarity in your own mind around why you're doing something. And for me, I feel like there's always twists and turns in your career and in your life, and that sort of journey that you're taking, and you will change your mind. And I'm at an inflection point at the moment with, my own young family, and how do I get that the right balance? And it's okay to do that, but it's always sort of rooted in that feeling of, I know what I want to achieve, even if it's not the minor things along the way. The what if and the so what factor in my life has always been very clear to me around my role in the industry and why I'm in it and why I stay in it and why I work hard. it's to make these positive changes happen. It's to be able to contribute to a built space, in my case, that is better when I leave the industry than when I came into it. It's more sustainable. There's places for people in a way that is better than before, that my children will be able to go into cities and they will function as greener and more pleasant places to be, that will support their social mobility and support their health and support their ability to be happy. And I think that if you have that, for me, that vision really gives me the energy to keep going and keep working hard and to be interested in what we're doing, because it's a really long journey. It's not going to be solved quickly, and there's so many interesting people that think along similar lines to that, but we all have different solutions and different ways of getting there, and that's really fun, actually. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I think I'm really lucky to work in an industry that, yes, it sometimes is hard and the hours are long and the problems are very complex, but the challenge is fun and the outcome is fun and enjoyable, and you're creating something. And I think that is what gives me the energy and the drive to keep doing it.
And I think basically what you were saying before about, having the vision makes it easy to then create your priorities and create the structure then from that around how you want to live your life. So, I mean, thank you so much for your time today, Rhian. It's been a fantastic journey through your experience and the key things that you've learned in there. There's definitely a lot to take away. One of the biggest things that I'm taking away is to really, if you've got that vision and that purpose and understanding why it is that where you are, you can draw energy from that and then use that to then create your priorities, focus in on those priorities, and then build the structure from there. So whether that's in your work life or in your home life, you'll make it work based on what the outcome that you're actually trying to see, and raise above the day-to-day nuances that can potentially burn you out otherwise.
I think so. It's that work with purpose. And for me, that's always been true. And the really good thing is, I think we're going to see a post-COVID world where working with purpose and having companies that have clear purpose is even more important.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you, and I'm really looking forward to not only see how your career progresses, but how we all progress after this, whatever the new normal looks like, whatever that is.
Exactly. Normals, I think it will be. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, anyway, thank you very much for your time. It's a Saturday morning for you. It's a Saturday evening for me. I can hear both our families in the background. Yeah. So, and I love that, because this is the reality of the world that we live in, and I don't hide my children, and neither do you. And I think more power to us, putting that forward. And I know that on my global calls that if my kids wander in, I, put them up on my lap for a couple of minutes. They say hi to all my coworkers and off they go again. Obviously not if I'm in the middle of a bid pitch, but, certainly.
This moment, I had Jolyon the other day come in a nappy, goggles, and he was carrying some weird, he was sort of wearing swimming goggles and nappy, and I think he had like a couple of soft toys, and he just sort of walked in, did a bit of a hi everyone to the camera, and then sort of walked out, and everyone I probably had 30 people on the call just burst out laughing, because he just looked, he had a cap on, a swimming cap on. I mean, it was like 2 degrees outside, but he was walking around like he was about to go for a swim. I think that's really nice, actually, having that, having people's families more connected with work is only going to be a positive thing.
And it's become much more acceptable too. So I'm really thankful for COVID for that, for all the bad that it's doing around the world. That's certainly something that bringing that more actually fit. It's not even physically, but you're going into people's living rooms. You can actually see their personal life in front of you. And I think that helps us connect much more on a personal level.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been really fun. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing it. And I look forward to seeing where you head next. And who knows, we might do a follow-up interview in years to come and see where you've got to.
Yeah, that would be good fun.
Thanks so much for joining us on Women Who Lead. Visit my website, jesscarr.com, where you can find other podcasts and link to information about Women Who Lead. If you found value in this show, please share it with your friends and let me know if there's anyone you would like to see on the show or topics you would like to see more of. Be sure to tune in for our next episode. I'm Jess Clark. Bye for now.